Promised Roman candles, election night. Said stand back folks, this one's huge. Budget boom with a harbor view. They said historic, they said bold. Said watch this city turn to gold. Drums were pounding, sparks would fly. Thought we'd see that skyline cry. Oh, they sold it like Guy Fawkes on the waterfront, like thunder rolling down Lambton Key, like the sky would split above the beehive, a technicolor destiny. But we gotta use packet of sparklers, half damn, two bent in half. Promised the scandal worth the fireworks. Got a backyard birthday laugh. They hyped it like the harbor was burning, like the heavens would explode. Turns out it was clearance, been promises on a cautious council road. They said more points getting sorted, more point wastewater treatment plant and neon lights. We're fixing pipes for generations. Cue the patriotic bites. Three waters renewed, they cried. Historic sums, civic pride. 14 councillors standing tall, one mayor smiling. That's all your animals like a standing ovation. 14 and 1 in perfect sync on the budget for three waters renewal. You think the sky would blink, but we gotta use packet of sparklers, fizzing out in the breeze. Promised the festival of detonations, got polite applause and tease. They framed that black revolution like the pipes would roar and glow. Instead it's duct tape optimism, moving carefully slow. They showed us glossy fly-through dreams, bike lanes shining in sunlit beams. Wellington City cycleways mapped in gold, safer streets, the story told. But somewhere between
And welcome to tonight's Order Paper Podcast, and I'd like to thank Alex for jumping in at the last minute after Reg has had to sit down there and isolate himself to stop him from getting RSV. So
Can I say something for Rick? Get well soon.
I think you need that for his wife, actually. You need it for Wendy first. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
Rick and his wife. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, that's all right. I mean, it's just one of those. So how's Alex this week?
Not bad, but today I managed to witness an accident down at Petone Pack and Save. I think some of your viewers may know that infamous middle parking space down there.
Ooh,
Pack and
God,
Save,
that's
which is
that's a car park that you just don't want to really go into.
let's just say
I think Pack and Save attracts the worst quality of drivers in their car parks. It's a Pack and Save thing. Because I'll tell you right now, okay, not quite Petone, but Pack and Save Kilburnie has way worse drivers in the car parks than Woolworths Newtown does.
Can I say something about youth drivers or ranger drivers?
What? That they got their Weet-Bix, got their licenses out of the Weet-Bix packet?
They hit an elderly woman's car and drove off.
Oh God, arrogant.
Yep. And I'm not trying to be racist or anything. When I saw that elderly lady walking out, She was in shock.
She wasn't shocked by the person's behaviour for doing it?
No, she was walking out in shock.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that would be quite normal if your car has been sat there and hit. Yeah. Okay. Well, we've got a ACT Party Bill marathon on tonight. God, that feels like sitting there and swallowing a bitter pill. But we've got Brooke Van Velden first up, followed by her, her colleague Karen Chow. So, you read through any of the bills?
I read through a bit of it because this evening I was doing documentation, so I'll try my best. I'll do my best if I can. But I want to say about that. What I want to say about that leave bill is that I have concerns about that free tiering system.
Yep, we will have the fun part there. So let's kick it off with the Honourable and mother-to-be soon, Brooke Van Velden.
Members, the ayes are 67, the noes are 53. The question is agreed to.
Arms Bill, third reading.
I call on Government Order of the Day number 2.
Employment Leave Bill, third reading.
Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Brooke Van Velden.
Madam Speaker, I move that the Employment Leave Bill be now read a third time. Today marks an important milestone for New Zealand's workplaces. With this bill, we are delivering long overdue reform to one of the most complex and problematic areas of our employment law, the Holidays Act 2003. For too long, both employers and employees have struggled with uncertainty, compliance costs and repeated payroll error. The status quo was not acceptable, and this government has taken action to fix it. This bill delivers a simpler, fairer and more workable system. First, it introduces an hours-based accrual system for annual and sick leave, with leave now being earned, taken and paid in hours. Employees will now accrue annual and sick leave in direct proportion to their standard hours of work from day one of employment, with no need to wait months before accessing their entitlements. This removes the need for confusing conversions between hours, days and weeks, and better reflects the reality of modern work practices, especially for those with variable hours. Additionally, bereavement and family violence leave will also be available from day one, in recognition that life's most challenging moments do not wait for length of service requirements. Second, the bill improves fairness in the sick leave system. No longer will a part-time employee receive the same amount of sick leave as someone working full-time. The hours-based accrual model is designed to make the system more equitable and better reflect the actual leave needs of part-time and full-time employees. Unused sick leave can still be carried over up to a cap of 160 hours, which is the equivalent of the current 20 days. Next, this bill reforms the way annual leave is stored. Leave will be banked in hours as it is accrued, and balances will no longer need to be recalculated when an employee's working hours change. This is fairer, more transparent, and easier for both employers and employees to understand. We are also simplifying how leave is paid. Instead of multiple overlapping calculations, a single hourly rate based on the employee's current base wage will apply across all leave types. This removes unnecessary complexity and ensures that people can be confident that they're being paid correctly. For those who work casual hours or additional hours on top of the hours in their employment agreement, the bill introduces a practical alternative, a leave compensation payment of 12.5% on top of the hourly rate. This means they receive leave entitlements upfront while still being compensated for leave for every hour they work. Employers will be freed from the complexity and administrative burden of tracking and calculating leave for variable hours of work. This bill also resolves a long-standing inequity affecting parents. Employees returning from parental leave will no longer be penalised and have their annual leave paid at a reduced rate simply because they choose to take time off to care for their child. Next, the employees will have increased visibility of their own entitlements. Pay statements will clearly show leave balances, helping employees understand what they've earned and what they can access. Just as important as the changes themselves is how we implement them. This bill provides for a careful and manageable transition period of 24 months to move the new leave system, with additional time for the more complex education sector. Finally, I wish to acknowledge and thank all stakeholders who have contributed to the development of this reform and who rose to the challenge of turning this bill into a reality. I also acknowledge those who have made submissions to the process, whose considered input has helped ensure this legislation is practical, workable and fit for decades to come. I'd also wish to thank my senior advisor, Janessa, as well as the officials at the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment who have worked tirelessly on this reform with me over the last 2.5 years. When I assumed this role, I was acutely aware of the long history of Holidays Act reform, a piece of legislation marked by repeated delays and growing public frustration at the lack of progress. Today, I'm proud to commend a milestone that successive ministers have sought, but until now have been unable to achieve. This bill delivers what the Holidays Act has failed to provide, a clear, balanced and forward-looking solution that gives people confidence in their leave entitlements and in the systems that support them. I commend this bill to the House. The question is that the
So, on the face of it, Brooke is selling how great the bill is.
Can I say something concerning about the bill?
Go ahead.
The cash up of annual leave.
Oh, yeah. See, that is something itself sits down there and basically gets my EBGBs up.
The part I want to say about that 25% is, does it take into account the current cost of living issues that's going on, or the cost of living crisis? And now in Wellington, how does it account for that people are now paying for water bills as well?
Well, I mean, the Holidays Act has nothing to do with paying water bills. I will tell you that right now, Alex. It has nothing, water bills in Wellington, the Holidays Act are completely irrelevant sort of things.
Okay, sorry, my mistake.
Sorry.
What I'm going to say is that how does that cash up of annual leave going to address the cost of living issues?
Well, it wouldn't. It will sit there and manipulate it. And that is something that I actually have concerns about, is the fact that annual leave, in addition to what your contracted hours are paid out cash immediately, which is quite a concern considering under the old system, there could have been points there that you could just sit down there and actually just accrue the leave into, you could just accrue it. You don't actually have to sit down there and pay it out. It's a juggling edge sword, because it means if someone who works, has a contract 40 hours, but often works 50 to 60 hours a week and has leave paid out based on 50 to 60 hours a week, is less likely to take the much needed 4 weeks annual leave, because they're going to be living off over the annual leave period. They're going to be living off 2/3 of the established lifestyle pay.
Can I also add another concern I have?
Yeah.
The part where it specifies a single payment rate for all leave.
Yeah. So it doesn't include whether you're, and the other thing that goes out there is the fact that we have sick leave is based on a daily basis. Annual leave, depending on what your employer is under the act that's going out, was based, even could be hourly or daily depending on the employer. And also bereavement leave is just paid on what is a usual or rostered work day. Same with domestic violence leave. So it is a bit of a juggling act of how it actually sits there and chooses it. So let's bring the breakdown of how the bill has been formulated and how it works for it. So the Employment Leave Bill repeals and replaces the Holidays Act of 2003, introducing a new framework for how leave is earned, taken and paid in New Zealand. The Education and Workforce Committee has recommended the bill has be passed with amendment. Okay, so the purpose is to replace the Holidays Act of 2003 with the new Employment Leave Act, create one simpler, more consistent leave system, aim to provide greater certainty for employees and employers, introduce a single framework for annual leave, sick leave, public holidays, bereavement leave, family violence leave, and leave payments. So, new category of working hours. The bill was divided into 3 categories. You've got standard hours, regular agreed working hours that generated leave entitlement. Additional hours, extra hours work below your standard hours. This is where things get a bit dicey. Casual hours, irregular work with no guaranteed standard hours. The distinction determines how each is earned. Annual leave begins occurring from day one of employment. Leave accrues only on standard hours. Employees earn 0.0769 hours of annual leave for every standard hour worked. So this is slightly shy of 4 weeks annual leave if you put this over a 12-month period. Employers cannot reasonably refuse requests to use accrued annual leave. I actually like that provision because I remember often having my leave declined when I worked for BP because it was inconvenient for the business. Existing rules allowing annual leave to be taken in advance remains available. Sick leave. Sick leave is also accrued from the first day of employment. That's a good clause. Employees earn 0.0385 hours of sick leave per standard hour worked. Sick leave does not accrue on additional or casual hours. Now, casual, I can understand. Additional, that can be a bit problematic, especially when a person has a 40-hour contract but often works 60 hours a week. Sick leave can still be used for dependents, family members who are ill. And maximum accrued sick leave limits remain. Bereavement leave, available from the first day. I like that clause. Applies to all employees, including casual workers. Okay, that can be a bit interesting on the casual worker front. Can be taken in whole or part days. Okay, it's a bit confusing on that part, but okay. Rules clarify when bereavement leave may be taken. I'd love to know what those rule clarifications are, but all good. Okay, family violence leave. Available immediately from the first day of employment. An employee can receive up to 10 days each year. Can be taken in whole or part days. Proof requirement remains similar to the current law. Okay, I'd like to know what that requirement is because that could end up breaching Privacy Act. But, if that is the requirement of the law. Now, public holidays. Now, here's where things get a bit interesting. Introduce a new otherwise working day test. Public holiday entitlement depends on whether the day would normally have been worked, which under the current Act is if you normally work it, you get the day in lieu. If you don't get the day in lieu, you only get the time and a half. The committee amends the bill so that employees who regularly work additional days are not disadvantaged. Now, that will come very useful for people who work for BP because that was something in there. Yeah, I wish Reg was here because he used to work for BP as well. Employers must notify employees when public holiday is treated as a otherwise working day in certain situations. And I wonder if that ties up with Easter Sunday because that's something that doesn't look like it's been tidied up in this bill. Leave compensation payment. Instead of earning leave on additional or casual hours, employees receive a 12.5% leave compensation payment on those hours. So that could be manipulated as, it's time and 1/8. So that could manipulate it as being disguised as overtime when it's not. The payment is made on top of the ordinary wages. Interesting part is what happens for the tax compensation that goes with it. Because under the casual part under the current Act, holiday pay has to be put through as a separate tax-paid calculation when calculating PAYE. It replaces annual and sick leave accruals on these rules. New leave method. New leave payment method. Every hour of leave is paid at an hourly rate. Creates one consistent method across all leave types. Simplifies payment calculations compared to the current Holidays Act. And now, national rosters for employees without fixed working patterns. Employers and employees must agree on a written national roster. Rosters should accurately reflect actual work patterns. So none of this, what do you call it? I'll roster you for 2 hours, but you stay for 6 every night. And some employers actively operate their business like that. Can be used as an agreed methodology for determining standard hours. Labour inspectors can determine a roster if parties cannot agree. Employees with multiple roles. Employees with more than one role for the same employer can agree how leave is managed. If no agreement exists, leave is calculated separately for each role. That is a complicated layer. That's just my thing. Cashing up leave. Employees may continue to cash up part of their annual leave. Alternative leave may also be cashed up. Committee amendments clarify treatment of incorrect incorrect payments, such as an employer forcing someone to actually take a payout when they shouldn't be. Yeah. Close downs. Employees can continue annual workplace close downs. Employees may use annual leave during close downs. Sick, bereavement, and family violence leave available during close down if applicable. Leave records. Well, this is pretty damn obvious, and it shouldn't have changed that. Employers must keep accurate detailed leave records, provide employees with pay statements, retain pay records that make them available where required, face penalties for failing to comply. Thank goodness that has not been taken out of the bill. Enforcement. The bill gives labour inspectors enforcement powers, allow penalty for breaches, provides the mechanism to recover unpaid leave and arrears. Transition from the Holidays Act. Existing leave balances will be converted into a new system. Employment agreements must be updated. Transition rules support implementation over time. Employers who have Holiday Act compliance issues can opt into a remediation process for historical underpayments. Other changes. Update restructuring laws when employee transfers employers. Amends numerous other acts, including the Employment Relations Act, the Parental Leave and Employment Protection Act, the Minimum Wage Act, the KiwiSaver Act, the Health and Safety Act at Work, the Social Security Act, and repeals the Holidays Act of 2003. Key committee changes. Improves the accuracy and flexibility of national rosters. Allow agreements for employees with multiple roles. Reinforce that annual leave is a rest and recreation. Clarifies when leave can be taken. Improve the otherwise working day test, which used to be known as a day in lieu. Strengthen leave records and enforcement, and improve transitional arrangements and remediation. There is a differing view from both the Labour Party and the Greens Party. The Labour Party opposed the bill, arguing it will reduce leave entitlements for workers, particularly those with irregular hours, and makes leave less secure. The Green Party also opposes the bill, saying it will disproportionately disadvantage part-time, casual, Māori, Pacifica, migrant, young, and low-income workers.
Can I add some criticism? Go
ahead.
The single, I need to find it. The single rate for all leave can potentially open up for employment tribunal cases.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm going to say now. This bill potentially opens up for employment tribunal action.
Yeah. Yeah, the bill, it hasn't, to be honest, from that summary, it has not simplified things. So from an accounting perspective, this has made things better. So you can actually accurately accrue the actual true value of the leave on your books to be as a liability, as a current liability in the balance sheet. However, it does not actually help clarify other issues that are in there, such as, so what happens if the person, it doesn't mention anything to do with what happens if the person has a pay rise during the year. Now, the old system had that also made things become a bit iffy if someone had a pay rise. But so say someone sits there and has a pay rise during the year, does the annual leave get paid out at the old or the new rate, depending on when it was accumulated? Or is it just based on the pay rate at the point of when the leave is taken? So it does. It's got both positive things and negative things in there, and some fish hooks. And the other thing is, bad employers will still use this to exploit it. I'm concerned, particularly, about the fact of what they would call additional hours can be misrepresented as overtime by a time and an eighth. And I'm concerned that might be in there, or a time and a 12th, or whatever. Basically, often, when I worked for BP, we had our overtime rates were time and a quarter. This could misrepresent, being paid. It could be classified as overtime when really it's normal pay rate plus holiday pay. And I do believe some employers will misrepresent that to their employees.
Another thing I'll add is, cash up annual leave is open to abuse.
Oh, it's been open to abuse for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that's pretty damn obvious.
So this bill may be better, but overall not good,
Yeah.
is in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to, was it our next speech from Labour?
Motion be agreed to.
Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Phil Twyford.
Well, I wish that I could say that it's a pleasure to stand and speak on this bill, but it's not. Like so much of what this government does, it takes from those who can least afford it. And from all of the documents, from all of the debates we've had in the House, all the submissions we heard at Select Committee, all of the exchanges with the Minister in the committee stage, it's clear that she and this government have chosen to prioritise administrative efficiency for employers at the expense of part-time and casual workers who lose money and lose time off as a result of this law. Where we agree is that the Holidays Act was a mess. It was complicated and unclear, and that led to a lot of unnecessary time and cost being wasted in firms' unpaid holiday pay and some humongously expensive and long-running payroll fiascos in some of the country's biggest governmental agencies, namely in health and education. It had to change. We agree on that. In fact, work was advanced under the former Labor government, which this government chose to throw out and start again. My point's not to defend that earlier work, but I will say this. This government consciously and deliberately chose a policy design that sacrifices the economic interests of part-time and casual workers. They sacrificed the interests of working people. At the heart of this bill is the definition of so-called standard hours and non-standard hours. Standard hours are those that are regular, contractually committed hours. And non-standard hours include overtime and casual hours. Annual leave and sick leave under this bill accrue from standard hours. And non-standard hours generate what the bill calls a leave compensation payment. And it's been established beyond doubt through this entire passage of the bill, through the Parliament, that employees with proportionately higher numbers of non-standard hours are going to lose time off and lose money when this bill becomes law, notwithstanding the payment of the leave compensation payment. That alone would be enough for us in Labor to oppose this bill. The government had any number of policy design options. They knowingly chose one that will weaken the position of workers who have the least power in our economy, part-time and casual workers. According to the Household Labour Force Survey, there are 588,000 part-time workers in New Zealand. That's 1 in 5 workers. And these are the people who will be adversely affected by this National Party Act New Zealand First law. As many submitters said at the committee, and the government's own officials advised them, the other big downside risk with this bill is that it makes part-time and casual workers cheaper for employers. And in a competitive market economy, that will undoubtedly act as an incentive for more employers to casualise their workforce. The insecure and precarious work that is a feature of life in New Zealand, with few guaranteed weekly hours, and the source of a kind of soul-sapping stress on so many working people, will become even more pervasive under this bill. The apparent nonchalance of government MPs about taking time off away from part-time and casual workers during these debates makes me wonder if they consider part-time and casual workers to be real workers, proper workers. Do they think that part-time work is something you do when you're at uni, or something that you do as a kind of hobby? No jobs for them too. Because it's not. Not for most people. There are a lot of people in this country right now who are struggling to survive. It is hard getting to the end of the week and having enough to feed your family and pay your bills. People cannot find full-time work. And they end up working multiple part-time jobs to try and make enough to get to the end of the week. And part-time work, combined with raising kids or looking after dependent family members, is bloody hard. These people cannot afford to lose time off and lose money. They're the ones who can least afford it. There's another way that this bill attacks working people. It undermines the principle of rest and recreation that is vital to people recovering from the stress and exhaustion of work. Whether you're in a job that's high stress or physically demanding or both, you need rest. But this bill converts the annual leave or time off into a cash allowance. And on top of that, the conversion of so-called non-standard hours into a payment, it allows workers to cash up 25% of their entitlement. So I asked members, who do you think is going to do that cashing up? Who are the people who are going to do that? In the committee stage, the minister mused that it would be people who don't like taking holidays, which speaks volumes about the narrowness of her life experience. I'll tell you who's going to be the people who cash up their holidays. Low-income workers, because they don't have the money to survive. They are the ones. That is a form of economic coercion. They can't afford to live on what they get paid, so if you offer them a chance to cash up their holidays, they will sadly take it. This government is the most anti-worker government that New Zealand has seen for a very, very long time. This bill, which takes money and time off away from New Zealand workers, of more than 500,000 New Zealand workers, is only the latest outrage. This government abolished fair pay agreements that would have allowed several 100,000 New Zealanders in low-paid jobs to better bargain and negotiate fair pay. They restored the right of all employers to fire at will during the so-called trial period. They legislated away the right of gig workers, like Uber drivers, to go to court and get the court to decide whether they are independent contractors or in fact employees with the rights of employees. They paid for their tax cuts for the rich, for landlords and tobacco companies by taking $13 billion that had been earmarked to level up the pay of workers, low-paid workers in female-dominated industries. Who does that? Who balances their budget and pays for tax cuts for the rich by taking away the money that was set aside to level up the pay of low-paid workers? Who does it? They do it. They do it. Most recently, they weakened the health and safety protections of 673,000 workers who work in small and medium enterprises. They weakened the health and safety protections. And they have allowed the minimum wage each year to fall further and further behind inflation during a cost of living crisis.
Tiano Tuiano.
Can I add something to Phil Twyford's?
Go ahead.
What happens if this bill benefits the people involved in the family violence dynamic? And that family violence dynamic includes women and children relying on that person for food.
Yeah. You know, what's going to be next under this bill are people who are working part-time, who are receiving social security assistance, going to win for a grant, have to cash out their leave because they can before they can get a grant. Like this bill, you know, what happens if you have an employer who doesn't like giving their staff leave and only cashes out their leave? And the cash out is the only option they have on the cards. You know, this does trap people who are in disadvantaged situations from actually taking the time off they require. You know, and burnout isn't good for a business. Burnout actually sits there and increases health and safety risk. It increases the cost on society, and it sits down there and leads to people where they end up sitting down there and end up costing more on society. Is the outcome of this bill going to be going to increase burnout in New Zealand? And what happens if, say, a future government likes to increase the annual leave to the equivalent of 5 weeks per year? You know, what happens if a person has in the employment agreement 5 weeks annual leave, not 4? What's the calculation for that?
Can I say something to Brooke Van Velden?
Go ahead.
Your bill in this form mimics what Hong Kong is doing with its workers.
Well, I doubt that she would actually sit there and struggle I don't think she could survive if she actually went and lived in Hong Kong, to be honest.
But what I'm seeing now, she's getting her cues from Hong Kong, or it's her inspiration. Because I have a cousin who works at the local jockey club. You don't want to know what time he starts in the morning. 5 a.m.
And what time does he finish?
Maybe
For context.
9 or 10 if the races are on.
So 9 to 10 a.m. or 9 to 10 p.m.?
9 to 10 p.m.
God. How many days a week?
I don't know the frequency, but I have been told about his shifts.
Yeah.
And this means he can't see his wife or daughter regularly.
Yeah.
Is this what Brooke Van Welden wants to bring over?
Well, things might change after November the 7th, but I'll probably say that's possibly the way she's looked at the world prior to being pregnant. Because she is very textbooky in her approach on idealism that does not seem to be grounded in reality with any real life experience. Yeah. Okay, let's get on to Tiana Tuiono.
Madam Speaker, I rise on behalf of the Greens to oppose this bill. This bill is another example of a pattern of behaviour from that side of the House where they trample on the rights of workers. And we have seen that since the beginning of this Parliament, with the cancelling of fair pay agreements, the bringing back of 90-day trials, etc., etc., etc. And just a reminder to the House that a number of us were on those steps of Parliament when the Pike River families came to this Parliament and asked members of Parliament across the House to oppose the ACT Party's health and safety reforms. But just as a part of that pattern behaviour, every single one of those government parties supported those reforms. And so my key message tonight is to the workers is to remember all of those government parties that supported all of these anti-worker pieces of legislation. Madam Speaker, in the Committee of the Whole House stage, we talked and had a number of discussions working our way through the bill. In the beginning of part one, we discussed the purpose of the bill, and I found the Minister's responses to be Orwellian doublespeak, because when you look at the purposes of the bill, and I'll read them out to you here, the purpose of this Act is to promote a balance between work and other aspects of lives, and to that end, to provide employees with minimal entitlements to, one, annual leave to give them the opportunity to take paid time away from work and for rest and recreation. 2, public holidays for the observance of days of national, religious or cultural significance. 3, sick leave for bereavement leave. And 5, family violence leave, Madam Speaker. But instead, what we've got is a bill which will significantly punch down on part-time workers and casual workers and will impact 200,000 workers, Madam Speaker. This was a number that I put to the Minister during the Committee of the Whole House stage to see whether she had done any work at all about the impact that this would have on the workers, because it had been reported in the media quite far and wide, work done by the PSA in terms of the analysis that they did on the impact of workers. Over 200,000 workers, Madam Speaker, is the number they came up with. And they had a few more specific details. It will impact negatively manufacturing meat, seafood, dairy, fruit and vegetables, wood, chemicals and metals workers, which is an estimated 24,000 affected workers. Electricity supply, an estimated 1,500 affected workers. Heavy and civil engineering and road construction, an estimated 1,500 affected workers. Retail, supermarkets, motor vehicles, electronic goods and furniture, estimated 11,000 affected workers. Road, bus, rail, water and air transport, an estimated 13,500 affected workers. Newspaper, publishing, broadcasting and telecommunication services, an estimated 1,500 affected workers. Financial insurance services, estimated 6,500 affected workers. Police, corrections, inland revenue, Department of Internal Affairs, Department of Conservation and Local Government, an estimated 35,500 affected workers. Health and the health sector, allied health, health administration, doctors, nurses, midwives, orderlies, care and support workers, ambulance officers, social workers, estimated 106,500 affected workers, Madam Speaker. That is a lot of workers negatively impacted by this bill. And as we have moved through the stages, I've actually bumped into people who have actually done the new calculations on how their leave will be impacted. None of it is good. None of it is good at all, Madam Speaker. And I do take the point around the previous system and the need to make sure that there is clarity and simplicity, and that is something I think both sides of the House would agree on. If something making sure that something is clearer, making sure that something is more simple, making sure that something is more accessible is a good thing. But here's the thing, Madam Speaker, there were options. And if you look back at the regulatory impact statement, there were 3 options that were canvassed. Option 1 was the status quo. Well, nobody wants that. Nobody wants an overly complicated system. And acknowledging that there had been work done to make sure that we sorted and worked through that. Option 2 was weeks-based accruals, and this option reflected the proposal presented in the exposure draft bill, which was largely based on the 2020 Holidays Act Task Force recommendation. So a whole lot of work that had been done to actually sort this stuff out. And the key change here was moving to a weeks-based accrual model for annual leave with a focus on, and this is the important point, a focus on providing clarity and certainty. And option 3 was the option that the Minister opted for. And we heard through the debates and also through the committee of the whole House stage again and again, the Minister wanting to focus on clarity, wanting to focus on simplicity. Well, he actually had 2 options there that could have done that. But that Minister chose the option that would take away rights of workers, that would punch down on part-time workers and punch down on casual workers. We also asked specifically a case that was brought as a part of the submission from the Workers' First Union, Madam Speaker, and it was an example that was used to actually try to get a sense of what the changes would be to this particular worker. And the example that Workers First brought to the Select Committee was workers as a part of Cotton On. They had 3 standard hours, but these workers were working around about 20 hours. And so the question that we put to the Minister, and she affirmed it, or my understanding was that she affirmed it, that under these new changes, that previously those full 20 hours would have counted to the accrual of this annual accrual of this worker's leave, would in fact be impacted in this way. That is, under this definition, the Cotton On members would only accrue annually for 3 hours per week. So over 52 weeks, these members would receive less than 12 hours of annual leave. Could you imagine that? You work for a whole year. For a whole year, you get 12 hours. A whole year, you get 12 hours. That makes a mockery of the purpose of this bill. And that is just one example of the way that workers will be negatively impacted on this bill. Because what it will do is it will force workers to make those types of calculations. Do I take the time off work? Do I transfer my sick leave to my annual leave? Or do I go to work? Now, we are in a cost of living crisis, and I know that many of these workers, many of these low-paid workers, the calculation that they will make is, I will go to work. I will go to work even if we are sick, even if they are sick. And just a reminder, because we also asked around the connections to the other reforms that this Minister has put out, what does that mean for health and safety reforms? Because we heard just recently, a couple of weeks ago, laws that were passed where non-critical risks will no longer be covered and be the responsibility of PCBUs, of small business owners. So we could have the scenario where workers are sick, can't afford to be sick, will go to work, and other people will get sick. So this runs a mockery of actually what this bill should have really been about. If you're sick, you stay home, you get better. If you need bereavement leave, you take that. Your annual leave should be used to make sure that you have the ability to rest and get that work-life balance properly. But that has not happened, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, the Greens do not support this bill. It is another example of this government punching down on the workers. It's another example of this government not listening at all to the workers. It is another example and a pattern of behaviour, unfortunately, of every single one of those government parties, and one of them in particular, cosplaying like they pretend that they care about the workers, going around pretending that they care about the workers. But my message to the constituents and to New Zealand out there is to judge them by their works. Judge them by the way that they vote on this bill, judge them on the way that they voted on all of the other bills, from the cancelling of fair pay agreements, to the bringing back of 90-day trials, to the rolling back of health and safety protections, to the misclassification of gig economy workers. This is a government which I can only think despises the workers. And no wonder workers are getting up and getting on a plane and getting out of here, going to greener pastures where there are better pay and conditions. Madam Speaker, the Greens oppose this bill. It will disproportionately impact women workers, Māori, Pacific and disabled workers. This is another example of a terrible bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
So,
Can I show your viewers a horrifying thing from my own hometown? First, yep. Is that what Brooke Van Velden wants to bring over?
yeah.
Even though it's
It's a
paywall.
shame it's a paid one, but besides the point, I think we get the gist of what it's meant to be.
And then the second one is Hong Kong's toxic work culture. Is that what Brooke Van Velden is seriously about bringing over? Because I can tell your listeners now what it was like in Hong Kong in the 90s under British control.
Yeah, no, it's pretty bad under that, you know.
Yeah. Young parents delegated their elderly parents to look after the children.
Yeah, well, that's actually, I think the better word of they were forced to do that, I think is the better word of actually sitting there and saying that, Alex, because delegating it is one thing, but like being put into a position where that's the only option on the table is probably what you are right. Because I mean, Hong Kong, I don't even think they even sit there and support, free childcare to facilitate people so they can actually sit there and work these ridiculous 60, 70-hour weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my question is, if Brooke Van Velden is bringing that here, stop her.
Yeah.
We don't need it.
Yeah. Oh, let's hear from Carl Bates.
Carl Bates.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As part of the National Party's focus at the moment on parental leave and ensuring we really support parents that are on leave and when they return to work, one of the things that this bill will do will ensure that new parents, when they return to work, receive the full value of their annual leave. It's a major shift from the status quo, Madam Speaker, and therefore I commend the bill to the House.
Honourable Member.
Seat warmer.
Okay.
I commend this bill to the House.
I commend this bill to the House.
I commend this bill to the House.
And this is what you call a seat warmer speech, so short that the camera doesn't get time to do the close-up.
Yeah, pretty much. That is basically, you're completely right on that one with Carl Bates. That was just so quick and so irrelevant. I mean, the thing he sat there and talked about was the fact about parental leave, which is probably taken into account of what happened with Katie Nimmin of the Stuart Nash debacle.
Can I say something to Carl Bates?
Go ahead.
If this bill passes, you're going to further down the line see parents being forced to get their grandparents to care for the children if they're working.
Yeah.
Sadly,
yeah, exactly.
That does not need to happen here. We do not need to learn from Hong Kong. No.
Yeah, you're right there on that one. Yeah, we don't need to learn from Hong Kong. Yeah.
So, sorry, Carl Bates. You are doing something that's really horrible, and Labour's really correct on not supporting the bill, let alone the Greens. And I believe they see the consequences of it too.
Yeah. Okay, let's get on to Mark Patterson. Sorry, I had to do some appeals on TikTok for the live streams.
Patterson.
Madam Speaker, I rise to, on behalf of New Zealand First, to support this employment leave bill. It is a change in how leave is accrued. The Holidays Act is an absolute dog's breakfast. Our own government departments could not navigate it. I think the nurses were up for a big whack to compensate them because government departments weren't able to comply with this law. How we're small and medium businesses, and those of us that has employed people will attest to that. We're moving to an hourly-based accrual model. There's a clear distinction here between standard and required hours, additional hours, excess work and casual hours, and the 12% compensation, leave compensation payment for part-time and casual-based workers. This, and of course the elegant solution that's being found for maternity leave. This adds simplicity, clarity, certainty and proportionality, a significant improvement on the status quo in New Zealand's First. Commend the bill to the House.
Well, that was very quick from Mark Patterson there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was not expecting that. But literally, he just by the sounds of what he just sat there and said there, he just literally just basically read the bill. He didn't really sit down there and state why New Zealand First sit there and supports it or anything. It just felt very dull.
Not even that. I mean, not even that. Mark Patterson should have even outlined why does New Zealand First support this bill. What in that bill they find as a positive. He didn't outline that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Give me a minute. I need to take some dishes back out, so I'll be back in a minute if I can.
That's right. And for those at home, Oranga Kuiper's next.
Oranga Kuiper.
Yeah, Te Pika, let me begin from a place of balance. There's no serious dispute that the Holidays Act needed reform. Employers, workers, unions, payroll providers and submitters all recognise that the current law has become too complex, too uncertain and too difficult to administer well. But the question before this House is not whether change was needed. The question is what kind of change we're prepared to accept and whose wellbeing sits at the centre of that change. In Te Ao Māori, Madam Speaker, mahi is never separated from the person who does the mahi. A worker is not simply a unit of productivity. A worker is a mokopuna, a matua, a parent, a caregiver, a partner, a member of a whānau. Their labour carries mana because their life carries mana. That is the lens through which Te Pāti Māori approaches this bill. Mana, whānau, whakapapa, manaakitanga, and the responsibility we all carry to uphold the dignity of those who work. This bill may make some calculations easier. It may offer certainty to payroll systems. It may respond to genuine problems created by the old Act. But simplicity is not the same as fairness. Certainty for systems must not come at the cost of uncertainty for workers. The concern is that leave is being shifted from a protection into a formula. Annual leave and sick leave exist because people are not machines. Rest is not a bonus. Recovery is not a luxury. Time with whānau is not an administrative inconvenience. These are the things that keep people whole, and Matariki, which we all celebrated nationally as a country, as a whenua, should have reminded every single member in this house of that. For Māori, wellbeing is collective. When one worker is exhausted, it's not only that worker who carries the burden, their tamariki carry it, their partners carry it, their communities carry it, their kaumatua even carry it, their whānau does. A law that weakens rest really does weaken, more than an individual entitlement, it weakens the fabric around that person. That is why the leave compensation payment troubles us. We support increasing the rate of the pay-as-you-go scheme, but we do not support the elimination of rules that enable some casual workers to get leave and the overriding of leave entitlements for overtime. Money pays bills, Madam Speaker, and many of our people know the pressure of needing every single dollar and cent that they can get, but you can't cash out exhaustion. You can't spend a percentage payment on your tamariki if you're too tired to be present. Burnout does not disappear just because it arrived on a payslip. This is not an abstract concern. It reaches the people cleaning our hospitals, caring for our kaumatua, driving the trucks, working shifts, working weekends, taking extra hours because the rent is due and kai still needs to be put on the table. Those carrying the heaviest workloads should not receive the lightest protections. We also hear the concern that a 3-tier system of standard, additional and casual hours may not deliver the simplicity that is promised. If even those who build payroll systems say that the framework remains complicated, then we must ask who this bill has truly become simpler for. A Māori position does not require us to reject reform, it requires us to ask whether reform is tika. Does it uphold mana? Does it protect whānau? Does it recognise whakapapa, including the obligation we owe to those coming after us, our mokopuna? Does it build a workplace system where people are cared for, or one where people are simply calculated? On that test, this bill falls short, it fails. We can modernise employment law without reducing the restorative purpose of leave. We can make payroll workable without making workers bear the cost. We can create certainty without diminishing dignity. Every generation is remembered for the choices it makes. Today, this House can choose to build a leave system around people, not around payroll. Te Pāti Māori will not support this bill, Madam Speaker.
I agree with Oranga Kaipara, to be honest. That 3-tier system is open to exploitation and manipulation.
Yeah. It's
Can I also add about long working hours? It can potentially lead to mental health issues.
Oh, exactly. Especially when people just constantly are burning out. It's it is very concerning when, and there are people out there, and the likes of Brooklyn and all that would, the way they portray themselves as they would rather have people work till they die. Attitudes. And that is more common in the low-income world, where you sit there and have that. I mean, I've never seen the dictatorialness over my time more, though, than those who pay peanuts and who treat their people like garbage, but expect you to go, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir, here everything on a gold platter. Would you like me to salute you, sir, Captain? Or something like that, They don't understand, this is one thing I like about the military is they sit there and say is, you earn your rank. You don't get handed to you on a silver platter.
Can I also add, one of the mental health issues that come from long working hours is as people age, it leads to inappropriate behavior, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think we have one of those in Parliament at the moment. His name is called Winston Raymond Peters. Who says at times in Parliament some very inappropriate things, especially like the fact about he sat there and said to Lawrence Sudan, go back to China, to the person who has been in New Zealand since he was 12 years old. You know, I mean, he'll probably sit there and tell you to go back to Hong Kong, despite the fact you've been here since, I think, was it, how old were you when you came here? Was it 8 or something?
Yeah, 1994. I've been here since 1994.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to say about long working hours, it leads to inappropriate behavior or violence. Because these people can't take their stress out. It's so, how I said, I've watched this in family members. They accrue the stress, and then once they really blow that lid off, it becomes either violence or shouting.
Yeah.
We don't
So
need that
basically,
here.
effectively, by not giving people adequate leave, they're effectively being pro-domestic violence.
Yeah.
You know, that's actually pretty damn concerning, the fact that, you know, some of these parties are like, you know, have no problem being pro, as I call it, you know, pro-domestic violence. I mean, the problem is with like many of things like the current government's doing is they're doing stuff that sounds good in the idealistic world, but in the unidealistic world, you're literally setting people up for failure, or you're setting people up to become a statistic. You're setting people up to be abused. And I can tell you right now, you know, often when the abuse happens, it's too late to remedy the situation. You're turning possibly very well-functionable people into broken people who cannot contribute to the way they want to in society.
And this is what the bill does, unfortunately.
Well, this is one. This bill literally lays the foundations for it. I mean, yeah, and that's just one piece of legislation. Yeah. So we're going to sit down there because we had enough of Brooke. We are going to have a look at another MP. Her name's called Karen. So let's see Karen. And the bill is the Oranga Tamariki responding to serious youth offending bill. Offending amendment bill, second reading. So let's see Karen in action.
Education and workforce systems.
That concludes oral questions. Members, I've received a letter from the Honourable Carmel Sepaloni seeking to debate under Standing Order 399, comments made by the Minister of Foreign Affairs in the general debate on 29th of July. This is a particular case of recent occurrence for which there is ministerial responsibility. However, having considered the application and the rationale for it, it does not appear that there is any matter in it that is immediately urgent.
To take a
hold on a moment. We have it's a split debate. We'll get the right
reports
one
it
up.
without amendment. Madam Speaker, I move that the report be adopted.
Here we are. We're starting to
The
get
question
the
is
right
that the
one.
report be adopted. Those of that opinion, please say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Those bills are set down for third reading next sitting day. I call on Government Order of the Day, number 5.
Oranga Tamariki responding to Serious Youth Offending Amendment Bill, second reading.
The Honourable Karen Shaw.
I present a legislative statement on the Oranga Tamariki responding to Serious Youth Offending Amendment Bill.
That legislative statement is published under the authority of the House and can be found on the Parliament website. Honourable Karen Shaw.
I move that the Oranga Tamariki responding to Serious Youth Offending Amendment Bill now be read a second time. Madam Speaker, when I became Minister for Children, I made it clear that we could no longer accept the out-of-control numbers of young people committing serious crimes. Every day we were hearing stories of harm caused to victims and the impact on communities across New Zealand as a result of the actions of a small group of young people. Every previous government spoke of the need to help these young people make better choices, to protect business owners and communities from young people who believed there would be no consequences for their harmful actions. Every election we were told things would be different and would get better, but repeated governments failed to deliver new solutions, failed to keep communities safe. This government has finally delivered, and this bill will allow us to continue this important work. This government has delivered a 25% reduction in children and young people with serious and persistent offending behaviour since June 2023. Young people are making better choices for themselves and their families. Communities are safer, but that does not mean that this important work is over. We are committed to embedding this achievement and identifying opportunities to further reduce youth offending behaviour, and this bill will contribute significantly to that commitment. This legislation will provide faster, stronger and more targeted response to this group through the establishment of a Young Serious Youth Offender Declaration and a Military-Style Academy Order. Every young person on a Military-Style Academy Order will get in-residence support with education, rehabilitative and cultural aspects, providing a pathway away from offending and back into their community and to employment or education. By majority, the Social Services and Community Committee has recommended the passing of the bill, with minor technical amendments that I also support and will outline now. Back-to-back orders. This amendment resolves an issue affecting youth court responses when a YSO declaration is nearing expiry. It allows the youth court to make back-to-back orders in limited circumstances for young serious offender. Section 285(5) of the Oranga Tamariki does not allow the youth court to make orders of the same type concurrently or cumulatively unless a limited exception applies. This conflicts with the recommendation from the Select Committee to enable orders to be made back-to-back in limited circumstances when a YSO declaration is about to expire. Due to an oversight and drafting process, this did not occur. I'm proposing to amend Clause 4 of the bill to address this. My amendment is to ensure that the Select Committee's changes to enable some orders to be made back-to-back can work as intended. This change is important because it ensures the Youth Court has access to consistent sentencing lengths for all young people, regardless of when their declaration expires. It also enables the Youth Court to continue to have access to non-YSO related conditions and orders when the YSO declaration has come to an end. Next amendment is around youth advocates. This is a technical amendment that clarifies that young people in a military-style academy order are entitled to representation by a youth advocate during secure care extension applications. This was simply missing a cross-reference in the draft bill as a result of a drafting error. The amendment ensures that young people in a military-style academy order will have the same access to legal representation as other young people in a youth justice residence. The amendment paper also makes 2 grammatical corrections to Clause 5(8) of the bill, inserting the word of after and suitability in 2 places. I welcome these amendments. They provide additional safeguards, increase transparency and strengthen the oversight of the military-style academy programs and youth serious offender declarations. Firstly, the committee has recommended changes to the Young Serious Offender Declaration to provide additional safeguards. The bill is now clearer that any offending under the age of 14 cannot be considered as part of the application process, and other safeguards have also been strengthened to ensure every young person has a family group conference before they can be declared a youth serious offender. This means a restorative justice process must take place first. It also means the young person and their family will be at the heart of a quality plan that responds to their needs and can address the underlying causes that drive the offending. The committee also recommended amendments that focus on improving the practical implementation of electronic monitoring and the use of force safeguards. This bill opens up new rehabilitative opportunities for young people to get outside of the youth justice residences to take part in wilderness camps or bushcraft activities or noho marae. As Minister for Children, the safety of all young people is my top priority. The use of force powers relates to young people on a military-style academy order intended to keep these young people safe, included when they're off-site. Use of force is at times necessary to prevent young people from harming themselves or harming another person. There were calls for stronger safeguards around the use of force during Select Committee. I heard those concerns raised by submitters. The new safeguards will make de-escalation the first approach whenever possible, and the use of mechanical restraints by Oranga Tamariki staff or approved workers of qualifying providers will be expressly prohibited, and all use of force incidences will be recorded. Submitters also felt that young people should be examined by a healthcare professional after any force incident, and I support that amendment, which will ensure an independent healthcare professional assesses the physical and emotional well-being of a young person. With the new safeguards introduced by the committee, the bill is not just stronger, it is safer, improving accountability and better protecting the rights of young people, and the bill also provides for further safeguards to be outlined in regulations. With all these in place, I'm confident that the use of force will remain an exceptional and carefully executed authority which serves its primary purpose to keep young people in our custody safe. Greater oversight of the military-style academy programs. The bill will now, an amendment to allow for qualifying providers to deliver components of the military-style academy program. Submitters call for appropriate oversight on those providers and of the military-style academy programs more broadly. I'm pleased to see amendments from the Select Committee that strengthen some of these oversight mechanisms. First, the bill is now more transparent in defining a qualifying provider, and these providers will be approved as community services providers in accordance with robust additional requirements. The safety and suitability of their approved workers, who will have the authority to use force, but will be assessed and approved by Oranga Tamariki. Finally, the committee recommended, and I fully support, amendments to strengthen the independent monitoring of the military-style academy programs. The Chief Ombudsman will now have access to all information relating to any use of force by an approved worker or a qualifying provider. This is a welcome expansion of the jurisdiction of the Ombudsman. The Ombudsman will also be able to investigate use of force incidences and play an active oversight role in the safety of the military-style academy programs. Qualifying providers will also be subject to the Official Information Act in relation to the delivery of any part of the military-style academy program to ensure greater transparency. Finally, I'd like to highlight an amendment that ensures that if a young person on the Young Serious Offender Declaration breaches an order or reoffends, ensures that the Youth Court can adequately respond to a non-compliance or reoffending, even if the declaration is set to expire in the coming months. This means that the Youth Court is able to follow a serious offender-specific order with a standard Youth Court order to follow on immediately when the declaration expires. This government remains committed to introducing solutions to the long-standing issue of reducing serious and persistent youth offending. We have already made excellent progress in this space. This bill complements the package of initiatives that we've already rolled out for most of the serious group of offenders. It does so by balancing public safety and accountability with the aim of reducing reoffending through rehabilitative responses. Our communities have called out for stronger, faster and more targeted responses. Our government heard the call and I'm delivering in this space. This bill can stop the cycle of offending and help young people committing serious crimes to turn their lives around, and I commend this bill to the House.
Well, the boot camps so far have actually proven not to actually be a success. They've proven to be a failure, with the reoffending rate being, was it 7 out of 10? And that could have been higher if it wasn't for one of the offenders literally dying.
Can I also add to one of the articles that I just sent to you?
Yes.
Wilderness camps in the US have been found to be doing false advertising.
Yep, we will talk about that after we've broken down the bill. We'll do that at a slightly later stage. So let's get into. So what did the Select Committee report recommended as a result of this bill? Let's bring it up. So the Select Committee report in a summary. Oranga Tamariki resolved. Okay. Committee recommendations. The committee recommends the bill pass by majority. It also recommended a number of amendments to improve the legislation would operate in practice. Purpose of the bill: create a new serious offenders, YSO declaration, apply to young offenders aged 14 to 17 who repeatedly commit serious offences carrying 10 years imprisonment or more. Allow the youth court to impose more stronger responses when previous intervention has failed. The young person is likely to reoffend. A declaration is necessary to prevent further reoffending. Introduce military-style academy orders for eligible 15 to 17-year-olds with young serious offender declarations lasting 3 to 12 months. Great idea. Let's sit there and send them to the army. And because of the offence, they won't actually be able to serve in the army or the Air Force or the Navy or any defence force in New Zealand. But hey, this is just what, this is like, do these people not actually understand you've got to be squeaky clean to sit there and be allowed to have the privilege of serving in our armed forces? Okay, main committee amendments. Young serious offender declaration. Clarify that a charge must be proved by a U court, not simply admitted at family group conference before a YSO declaration application can proceed. Yep, that's fair. We want to have that in front of a judge. Made similar drafting changes throughout the bill for legal consistency. So you submitted a bill that was legally that had inconsistencies. No, not surprised there. Okay, youth court powers near expiry of a USO declaration. Prevent gaps when a USO declaration expires before other youth court orders. Allow the court to oppose a YSO specific order until a declaration expires. Immediately follow with standard youth court order. Ensure the combined duration period does not exceed existing sentencing lengths. Okay, family group conferences. Strengthen family group conference involvement. Require conferences to specifically consider what should happen if a YSO declaration is made. Confirm the chief executive of Tamariki or representatives can attend the conference. Okay, electronic monitoring. The committee recommends practical improvements. Course must specify when curfews begin. Well, that's basic stuff there. Allow approved travel for non-urgent medical and dental appointments. That would actually be something that kind of needs to actually be done because, some people sit there and do it. Clarify what monitoring information may be collected or used. make provisions apply to all electronically monitored young people, not only YSO orders. God, so we're going to start having teenagers wearing ankle monitors. Key pictures go, oh, hey guys, look what I'm wearing. Look, it doesn't comply with the school uniform, but guess what? The court said I have to wear it. Screw you, the court, screw you, school. You know? I mean, yeah, well, you know, you can picture how some people will sit there and brag about having, showing off an ankle monitor at school, so look how cool I am. Okay, military-style academy providers. To improve safeguards, can we recommend providers must be approved community service providers. Regulations specify how providers and staff are assessed for safety and suitability. Stronger approval requirements for providers can operate military-style academy programs. Yeah, I wonder what's going to be next. These young offenders learning how to use firearms? Because they might not actually pass a medical, even under the recently passed arms bill that was read earlier in the day. Okay, the Ombudsman oversight. I like this guy. They usually, extend the Chief Ombudsman jurisdiction to include qualifying military-style academies. Good. You've actually got something decent that's actually in the bill. Why wasn't it there in the draft? I don't know. But hey, Karen, that's why we have select committee. So thank you for sending us to the select committee, Karen. You're doing a good job. Okay, give the Ombudsman power to investigate complaints, monitor providers, and report proactively. Okay, now the use of force. Now this is when things get a bit iffy here in society. Okay, use of force. The committee added safeguards by recommending de-escalation must be a first attempt first. And actually, I agree with that in many dispute situations, including I've been in one where I attempted de-escalation and the two nasty people who were unlawfully detaining me because of the mere crime of falsely accused of yelling at them justified it, did actually chose to escalate that. So, what happens when a staff member does not sit there and do that? There needs to be a form of punishment for that. Physical force is to be a last resort. Great. Make sure it is a last resort, not a first resort. Mechanical restraints such as handcuffs, spittoons, waist restraints are excluded. Yeah. What happens if they get used? Do the people sit there and get criminally charged, or does it get swept under the carpet? So you've got to make sure that you have the mechanisms of when they are abused. They have to hold the people who do the abuse accountable to the standard of the New Zealand law. No sweeping things under the carpet there, Karen. You're going to have to make sure that as the, Minister for Children. Every young person subjected to force must receive a health assessment as soon as possible. Now that can be a good thing, but that could also be a bad thing, especially when there is distrust. So, that might help, but that might not help. And what happens if the, the medical provider gets paid off by a thing called a bribe from the person who did the restraint? You don't want someone to sit there black eyes to sit there and write, put no physical bruises available and sit there and write a false statement. So, Karen, got to sit there and make sure that doesn't happen. There is the Minister for Children. Okay, all uses of force must be reported under operational requirements rather than relying on solely regulation. Good, and they should be in the Ombudsman inbox on the next working day so that the Chief Ombudsman can sit down there and have his EA go for his emails, go, oh, look, there was another was it, physical force restraint at the military academy in the back of the, what's that, back down to Gloriavale? Sit there and do that. Now, there are some differing views. The Labour Party, no surprise there, opposed the bill entirely, arguing military-style programs have previously failed, which is correct. The Royal Commission into Abuse and Care recommended moving away from institutional approaches. Funny that. The pilot has not been evaluated. Māori will disproportionately be affected. The YSO labels are stigmatising. New force powers are concerning. And too much operational detail is left to regulation. And family group conferences are weakened. Now, while we've got some disagreement there, let's talk about the Green Party. They oppose the bill because they argue youth crime has generally declined. Crime labels are harmful. Military-style academies are unsupported by evidence. Previous boot camps caused abuse. The pilot differed significantly from the proposed legislation. The use of force against children is unacceptable, and community-based rehabilitation is more effective. And Te Pāti Māoris think they oppose the bill, arguing it disproportionately affects Tamariki Māori. Boot camps conflict with the Royal Commission's recommendations. Shit show, that's no surprise there. What do you call it? Was it YSO's labelling as harmful and dehumanising? The use of force increases the risk of trauma, and community-led, tikanga-based response are preferable. The select committee process referred to the committee on the 21st of November 2024. Minister briefing on the 29th of January 2025. There were over 5,000 written submissions, 157 oral submissions, and advice received from Oranga Tamariki, New Zealand Police, Ministry of Justice, Office of Clerk, and the Parliamentary Council. For those who are watching at home, please put your comments of discuss into the chat. And Alex, please feel free to vent your comments of discuss.
Can I say, when Karen said that wilderness camps were effective, the Americans don't see it that way. And I know two activists in the US, they are anti-troubled teen industry activists, and they say wilderness camps have a higher rates of abuse.
Exactly. And what do you do when that person gets abused? Do you sweep it under the carpet, Karen, or do you sit down there and call it out? Because I have some feeling the broom and the carpet might be your first resort.
So my next question to Karen is, what happens if there is not just one report of abuse about that wilderness camp, but multiple?
I think that broom and that carpet's going to have a big bulge in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Sorry if I'm making something that sounds so serious sound comedic, but hey, we've got to at least sit down there and actually kind of visualize a carpet that just the bulge just gets bigger, bigger, and bigger.
And can I also say an American article found out that what the wilderness camps do are actually exaggerated. It doesn't solve any issues.
Well, and also here's the other thing here is the fact that the Army, the New Zealand Defence Force doesn't want to participate in this, and the result of the military, military-style camps aren't going to sit down there and lead to these people who may have a passion to now join the military from actually being allowed to join the military. So we're going to have these people who are going to be set up for this great way. Oh, they're going to have such a great job in the Army or something like that, and then sit down there and be let down. And then what happens when they get let back onto the street? Oh, they could sit there and re-offend and be in the adult courts. So, Karen, please sit down there and, you've got Committee of the House coming up. Here's some chances to right some wrongs. Because, let's sit there and get, you'll have your opportunity to get this right. So, shall we get on to Willow June Prime? I think that's a yes. There we are, Willow.
Call on the second reading of the Oranga Tamariki Responding to Serious Youth Offending Amendment Bill. Labour opposes this bill. Instead of making all youth justice facilities and making sure that they have intensive wraparound therapeutic interventions that work, this government resorts to an approach that has failed time and time again, simply because it plays well to their political base. The tough on crime rhetoric, the punitive approach to youth offending rhetoric. Mr. Speaker, I asked questions in the House earlier about the government's second military-style academy, and the Minister refuses to answer those questions. The first military-style academy pilot was a failure. As the government was warned that this would not succeed, that it has a high chance of a failure rate, they ignored expert evidence and pushed ahead regardless. We know that in that case, 8 out of 9 of the young people went on to re-offend. Today, I asked the Minister questions in the House about the current military-style academy that is underway, and asked why 2 young people voluntarily left the in-residence component of the latest military-style academy. And once again, the Minister refuses to answer any questions about that. Mr. Speaker, we are opposed to this bill for many reasons. First and foremost, our approach, Labor's approach, is to implement policies that are evidence-based and shown to work. What is known across the world about military-style approaches to youth offending is that they do not work and they can cause harm. In fact, I want to quote Mana Mokapuna's submission on this bill, which put it clearly, quote, "International and domestic evidence is clear that military-style approaches to youth justice do not work in the long term and frequently cause further harm for Mokapuna who have already experienced lives of trauma. Nothing that is military-style in character should be written into New Zealand law as a sentencing option or be used in the rehabilitation of Mokapuna. Interventions need to be informed by the evidence base of what works to prevent cycles of offending and give effect to our obligations under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and Te Tiriti." Mr. Speaker, harm continues in our youth justice facilities. About the time this bill was introduced to the House, we were acknowledging the apology that the Prime Minister gave on behalf of the Crown for decades of egregious neglect, abuse and harm of young people in care, including in military-style academies and youth justice programs. The Royal Commission into Abuse in Care included in their report an entire chapter on the notorious Whakapakari boot camp, where the most heinous abuse occurred. We know that abuse still occurs today. Young people in youth justice facilities continue to experience abuse and harm, both from their peers and from staff. We need to pay heed to what the Royal Commission told us. We need to listen to survivors of abuse and care, and we need to learn from what went wrong in the past. But introducing this bill and pushing ahead despite the outcomes of the pilot and what they are seeing in the current military-style academy does none of that. Mr. Speaker, the learnings from the pilot. The Prime Minister, when this was put to him, said he didn't care whether it does or doesn't work, they're going to do it anyway. The government justified the pilot military-style academy as a way to learn about what worked and what didn't work, and then they would adjust the bill. The pilot tests an approach to learn from it, assesses what was learned and decide whether to do it again or not. This isn't what happened here, Mr. Speaker. The pilot military-style academy was still in progress when the bill was introduced to the Select Committee. The pilot itself was not a success, with similar rates of offending and reoffending, to what occurred when young people go through the usual youth justice facilities. There are also key differences in relation to what was in the pilot and what is in this legislation. That raises further questions about the negative impacts of this legislation. For instance, Mr. Speaker, the pilot was voluntary. The legislation mandates military-style academies as a sentencing option. There is an important difference. Voluntary participation has an impact on the experience and outcomes. Voluntary participation also means that young people can leave the military-style academy if they are experiencing harm. The legislation does not allow for that. And as we have seen with the most recent military-style academy, 2 young people voluntarily left the in-residence phase of the military-style academy. That cannot happen under this legislation. Also, in the pilot, it was 12 weeks in residence, whereas in the legislation, it allows for up to 12 months. We know that the longer time a young person spends in residence increases institutionalisation and isolation, potentially impacting negatively on the young person, particularly when they have no option to leave the military-style academy. The pilot was also a cohort of young people who started and finished together. The legislation does not appear to account for this, with the potential for young people to be coming and going off the military-style academy sentences. This can have a negative impact on them. It is not clear, Mr. Speaker, what the pilot was supposed to test, given this legislation is so different from what was in the pilot. The pilot didn't teach us anything we didn't already know, and that is that the best approaches are wraparound and therapeutic, not military in any way. Mr. Speaker, we know that this bill is discriminatory. When we look at the young people who are most likely to be sentenced to a military-style academy, 85% of the young people directly affected by this bill will be Māori. Yet the bill was not developed in partnership with Māori. There was no consultation and there was no reasonable and good faith engagement. Māori, Pasifika, rangatahi whaikaha and rangatahi with neurodiversities and neurodisabilities are overrepresented in the youth justice system. It will be these already vulnerable groups of young people who bear the brunt of this risk. Mr. Speaker, there was a lot of submissions on the negative aspects of labelling our young people as young, serious offenders. Again, it suits the political rhetoric, it suits the punitive rhetoric that we have heard. What we found out through the Select Committee process is it is not required administratively. So why is that label being put on young people? Mr. Speaker, I only have 2 minutes left to make further contributions. I want to turn to the fact that there are important details in this legislation that are being left to regulation. It is one of the many concerns that we have with this bill, that a great deal of detail is going to be in regulations, including the implementation, operation and monitoring of military-style academy programs and providers, and safeguards for the use of force and actions that must be taken to ensure a young person subject to the Young Serious Offenders Declaration receives the appropriate standards of care. All of those really important things are not in the primary legislation, and they are being left for regulations. Mr. Speaker, the widening of the use of force is something that concerned many submitters. That has been left to regulations. The safeguards around the widening the use of force powers is going to be done in regulation. Our Select Committee has not had the opportunity to see what any of that is and to scrutinise what any of that is. Extending the use of force powers to third-party providers who may not receive appropriate training and support simply heightens the risk of harm to these young people. Mr. Speaker, to sum it up, given this bill is likely to pass, we will be bringing amendments to the Committee of the Whole for consideration to reduce the potential harm that could be caused to young people. But it must be clear and on record that the Labour Party opposes this bill, and we believe it has no place in legislation, the sentencing of children to a military-style academy.
So,
can I say something about this? I'm going to add to what Willow Jean Prime is saying, but I'm going to probably be labeled as crazy for using a video game comparison. If your listeners play Resident Evil, the upcoming Code Veronica, I advise them to maybe watch the gameplays. You will see that you will see what happens when someone is driven into despair from the trauma, if you know what I'm saying, of being alone. And the boot camps does that.
Yeah. Now, before we go, Alex did bring this up as an article. So, let's actually now sit there and do it. Dark Forest, a look into the conversion wilderness therapy camps. So, it's, and this goes through of what people have sat there and gone through there, and also telling you how much it doesn't work of these programs here. So, yeah, and also, was it the deaths? Gee, so the death numbers are up, are up there, which is quite concerning because that's not the whole point of these camps, aren't to sit there and have deaths associated with it. So we will make that article available here, and I'll post that into the chat right now. And we'll go on to MP Tamariki Paul, who is going to give her take on this bill.
Tamariki Paul.
Alongside youth and social workers, parents, criminologists, psychologists, judges and lawyers, survivors of abuse in state care, the outgoing Children's Commissioner and Mokopuna themselves, the Greens completely and in the strongest term oppose this bill and have from the beginning. Now, this government likes to claim credit for a reduction in youth offending, which was already happening. I hope that every New Zealander completely rejects the moral panic that has been whipped up in this House by the minister who is meant to protect the most vulnerable children in this country to make it out like things are much worse than they really are. Because if you actually look at evidence, which should be the absolute fundamental basis of any legislation that concerns vulnerable children, you will see that for decades, youth crime has been in decline, bar a spike during the COVID-19 lockdowns. And that's not something that any one government can take credit for. That's because finally, as a country, we've gotten smart enough to accept that punishing children does not get the outcome that it intends. It has never worked and it will never work. What the spike in youth offending showed us during the COVID-19 lockdowns is that when you, and this was acknowledged by the Minister of Police at the time, that if children aren't able to be in school or in their communities and they are stuck at home in unsafe environments, they will offend. That is exactly what these military-style academies, or boot camps as everybody else calls them, does. Now, let's start with the boot camps. There's a lot to say on this bill, and I'm going to try and break it down, but 10 minutes simply isn't enough time to explain why this bill is so deeply cruel and callous. The military boot camps are a complete slap in the face of every person who was abused in state care that this House apologised to 2 years ago. In fact, Sonia Cooper, one of the lawyers who has been standing in solidarity with survivors, actually said that the military-style academies is like giving the fingers to the Royal Commission. And it's because it's not learning from our history. As the previous speaker just said, there was a boot camp on Great Barrier Island called Whakapakari in the 1970s where Children were abused and tortured. And the three main settings of that boot camp that allowed for that abuse to take place was the lack of safeguards, untrained staff, and the fact that it was in an isolated location. And that is completely reminiscent of what is taking place in these boot camps, where you have a lack of safeguards in this bill, which will be developed later on as part of the regulations once this bill is already in law. It gives power to third-party providers where there is no standards for what level of training or expertise those staff have to have. And the trials for this boot camp was again in an isolated location where most of the participants are from Auckland and were trucked down to Palmerston North, isolated from their communities and their families. Can we not see that this is repeating history again? All of the evidence points to the fact that boot camps do not work. There is not one shred of international or domestic evidence whatsoever that military-style interventions work to reduce crime. But there is plenty of evidence that says that trauma can indeed be inflicted or compounded by these military-style, short, sharp, shock type of interventions provided for in this bill. Even the New Zealand Defence Force, you know, the voice on military, expressed serious concerns to Oranga Tamariki around the boot camps. And that is why this kind of approach will never work. And let's talk about the trial for a minute as well. The trial that was piloted on these boot camps actually never mattered in the first place, because this legislation was already written before the pilot had even been completed or evaluated. Not to mention, a pilot should always try and replicate the conditions that it is meant to operate with in real life. The trial of these boot camps cannot be further from what the boot camps will actually be. The pilot was voluntary, the actual boot camps will be compulsory. The pilot was 12 weeks, the actual bill proposes 12 months. Incentives were offered to the participants in this trial, such as less time in detention, which will not be reflected in real life. The pilot itself had far more resources than most youth justice residents even have to run military-style academy. And the pilot's participants had not been designated as young serious offenders as proposed in the bill, which may have affected their actual experience. Every child in the trial was given hundreds of thousands of dollars of resource, which they deserve, because they have been failed by multiple systems. But the reality of when these are implemented is each child that passes through this boot camp will not be given that level of care and attention and resource that they deserve, but will not get, because this government threw everything into this pilot to try and make it work, and guess what? It still failed. And in the end, what it shows is that even children from the most troubled background, given all of this resource, being given access to the highest level of officials, that it is a broken model, and no matter how much you try to change what it really is on the inside, it simply will not work. Now, the YSO label is something that we're deeply disturbed by, and that's because when you label a young person when their brains are still developing, it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. We feel that labelling a young person will have detrimental lifelong impacts on how that young person sees themselves, how they see their place within society, and how they see their lifetime's potential. To be clear, there is absolutely no administrative or legal benefit to designating human beings or children as young serious offenders. We heard that from the Criminal Bar Association, we heard that from youth law, we heard it from people who work in the courts, from judges to lawyers, who say that there is no benefit to this except a sick punishment from this government who went around campaigning on cracking down on the most vulnerable kids in our country. And did this House not learn the lesson on what happens when you label a group of young people? Because, you know, there were some young Māori men that stood before a court actually in Lower Hutt, and guess what? They were labelled mongrels. They were labelled mongrels, and guess what their life turned out to be? That is how the mongrel mob was created. Because you don't realise also that these labels can also become badges of honour. Experts came and spoke to us about that and said, be careful when you create a label like a young serious offender thing, because it might become a badge that people actually want to earn. Because what we know about youth offending is that these activities like ram raiding becomes a badge of honour. They do it for social licence to impress their friends in some cases. And congratulations, you've just handed them another badge of honour for them to earn. Now, the other thing that we're deeply concerned about is the fact that this bill legislates for police and third-party providers to be able to use force against young people. And for the record, there is never a reason where force should be used against children. And that was the overwhelming sentiment from people who work with children, actually work with some of the most difficult, violent children, have said there is never an excuse for violence or force. Because if you use that against a child, you are telling them that they too are able to use violence and force to get what they want. And you know, some people make the argument that we have to use force to prevent children from absconding from these youth justice residences, which we say to that, children do not try to escape from environments that meet all of their needs. And we know for a fact
that there is some dodgy behaviour happening in those youth justice residents, and Korowai Manaki is the worst. That is why those kids keep jumping up on the roof. You heard today in question time what's been going on in Korowai Manaki, but the Minister won't let any of us into the youth justice residents to actually see what's going on. But there has been consistent reports from OPCAT monitoring to say that there is dodgy dealings going on in Korowai Manaki. I've got 30 seconds left. I haven't even touched all of the details within the bill because it is that disgusting of a bill. We think that it is wrong to try and be tough on people and young people whose lives have been tougher than any of us could fathom. And that is why we are in complete staunch opposition to this disgusting bill and the boot camps.
Ryan Hamilton.
Can I add something to what Tamariki Paul is saying?
Go ahead.
I agree with what she's saying about those wilderness camps, because one of the biggest questions in that American article is, were the people running those wilderness camps qualified to work with children?
Yeah.
And I know where she's coming from.
The problem is there are people out there who believe the short, sharp shock approach is the way to deal with things when you've got something in there to scare someone into compliance. The problem is when you give the short, sharp shock approach, when it possibly, is a false accusation. Oh, well, let's punish now, let's hope nothing happens later. That creates a victim. That creates abuse. The concept of short, sharp shock, is great when you've got your ducks in the row and your facts straight. When you've got your facts wrong, you sit down there and you create an injustice. And then what happens when you get the injustice? You sit there and send the wrong message to people. And when you sit down there and you keep, doing that, what's going to be next? Those who are abused, who get short shots, I'll give them a whack. That will sit there and teach them to do it. What are they going to do to their kids? Oh, well, they might give their own kids a whack. It breeds generation on generation violence. And it's something that we as society needs to sit down there and just basically sit down there and, have a better approach on doing things. I know when my grandma was associate principal at Poirot College, she did a very big job on turning around wayward youth who went through her office, if intervention didn't happen when she stepped in, they probably would have ended up in the youth court or ended up in prison. Many of the people she intervened in don't have criminal records, don't have domestic violence charges, don't do it. My grandma definitely knows work. She did that as a Pākehā woman in a Māori predominant college and is very well respected by the Māori and the Pacific people of Poirua for the work that she did at the time. And that it reminisces of people who sit there and go through that and just remember the efforts and the lengths she went to sit down there and get the worst part of it, because it delved into what the problems are. And she told me some of the stuff that she said there was, she went when she did some of these home visits to try and, find out what went wrong in the house and that. It was scary. Like the stuff that she sat there and said, I don't know how the hell these houses could live and all that sort of thing. But, she went in, talked with the parents, got things going through there and worked on results. Helmut Modlick, one that can sit there who from what was described, said that my grandfather was the only principal who didn't give him the strap. And why was my grandfather the only principal who didn't give him the strap? Probably because he didn't assume he was guilty because he was Māori. He probably sat down there and got the facts straight. And there was mindset back at that point that Tamariki first brought up with the abuse of where people sit and go, well, if they're Māori, they're guilty. Or if they're Bart, they're guilty. And unfortunately, when you use that response, when you're dealing with things there, you end up breeding, the fact of guilty, I don't care about your innocence attitude. And it's a disgusting attitude to have. And that's the problem with this bill, is it breeds that type of approach. It's a shame. And I hope like hell it gets rewritten in a future parliament to get rid of that approach, because otherwise we're just going to keep, we're going to have a raw abuse, inquiry 30 years in the future, and going to sit there and go, oh, look, Karen Chow, you can picture what it's saying. It is a stain on society. You can have Karen Chow in a simmer frame coming across, sitting down there and, being as a 70-year-old woman, sitting down there having to address the nightmares of what she caused when she was an MP in her 40s.
Can I say something to Karen Shaw?
Go ahead. As long as it's G-rated.
Why are you like that? It's like, I want to ask, why are you like that, Karen?
Oh, I don't know.
And then like the second thing is, we don't need this bill. We don't need trauma again, you know what I'm saying?
We don't need state-sanctioned trauma.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get. We don't need state-sanctioned trauma. And the second thing that it's like, I'm trying to say, I'm not so fit for words now. Karen, you've made the worst mistake of your life with this bill, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, she probably doesn't think it. Remember, she believed to get rid of Section 7AA out of the Oranga Tamariki Act, which was the one to look at, family reunification, was because of her own experience in the system before Section AA was law. It wasn't law in the 90s when she was growing up through, child, youth and family system of the day. It became into law in 2018. When Tracy Martin was the Minister of Children. Let's go on to Ryan Hamilton, who will tell us why the Greens and Labour have got it wrong.
Thank God Tamitha Paul is not in charge, Mr Speaker, and may she stay in opposition for a very long time. To try and conflate the abuse in state care with this bill is ludicrous. The opposition, especially the Greens, have memories like goldfish. The trauma which was experienced in 2022, 2023, well past COVID, by the way, goes to the business owners and members of the public who experienced ram raids right through Hamilton and the malls and other centres across the country. But this is just another example of proactive, measured law and order and community safety that may well be the necessary intervention that these young people need.
And the great thing here is, Ryan, it was the Labour government who went forward and put in basic security measures such as, funding bollards in front of businesses so they wouldn't get ram raided. Hamilton East, there was your seat warmer speech from your local MP. And Tony, our great friend of the show who helps us with accommodation, please look down the ballot paper on who else could represent you. Any comments you'd like to make, Alex, or are you just...
I'm going to say about that last speech. When he tried to conflate the victims of abuse or state care, he was being really disingenuous.
Yeah. Yep.
Sadly. And can I say something about some of these? At least I know one on my Facebook who is a victim of abuse and care. He's permanently traumatized.
Well, Ryan Hamilton will probably say it's an excuse of a convenience, the way his attitude was in that particular speech. You end up drawing that conclusion.
And the second thing I want to say to Ryan, that person who just did that speech, is it fair for someone to be, to be like the hermit crab, being permanently traumatized and just doing woodworking in the back of his
He'll
head?
probably sit there and say, why don't you just get over it? Which doesn't sit down there and address the problem.
That's pretty much it. And can I say something? Why do we have high alcoholism in this country? And I can bet
it's because of people who give attitudes like Ryan Hamilton there.
Yeah.
He will sit down there and contribute to the, where people are using alcohol to medicate away trauma.
Yeah.
And it's quite actually serious because that also causes other issues on the health system. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get on to Jamie Arbuckle. Fingers crossed. It's a better speech.
Jamie Abbott.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise on behalf of New Zealand First to support the Oranga Tamariki Responding to Serious Youth Offending Amendment Bill. Firstly, I'd just like to thank the Select Committee and the amendments that they've made to this bill. But, Mr Speaker, it is with no pleasure to be standing when we are talking about our future generation of like 14 and 17-year-olds that this bill is actually targeted at. But we are, Mr Speaker, talking about serious crime committed by multiple high penalty offences. So it's the most serious offences that we could think of. And it is declaring YSO, and I know, Mr Speaker, you don't like acronyms, what's a young serious offender, but it is targeting those most serious cases. And it is about these youth that have been out of control, causing persistent crime in our communities. And this side of the House, we believe that there should be consequences for your actions. One thing, Mr Speaker, Madam Speaker now, is about restoring public safety, and this government wants to make sure that public safety is restored, so making sure that offenders that are causing the most offence there is actually programs put in place. But it's also about rehabilitation and focused interventions, and we have heard about the military-styled academies, and this is a tool in the toolbox, but it's not used all the time, but it is a tool that can be used. But, Madam Speaker, there needs to be effective deterrence, and being having children and being like a family or anything, you need to be able to teach consequence, and sometimes deterrence and actually having programs, and if there's consequence and you do something, that's where you can end up, is actually a tool in itself. So this legislation makes a significant step towards addressing the complexities of youth offending, ensuring that our justice system serves both the offenders' rehabilitation needs and the public's demands for safety and accountability. So New Zealand First strongly supports this bill as a fair and necessary response to serious youth crime in New Zealand, and I commend the bill to the House.
Just hold on. Can I say something to Jamie Arbuckle?
Go ahead, yeah.
What you just said was just disgusting, Jamie. Yeah. And if I'm going to say it now because I have to use overseas research to back my views up. The Americans found, or the child or the support workers found, many of the children or young people who were attracted to gangs were because the parents weren't there, or died, or they died at an early age or abuse.
Yeah, or they were put into, into care. Now, we do have a question here. Is this the UK? No, mate, it's New Zealand. I think if you take a look at the House of Representatives, you might notice something a bit different to the House of Commons. If we sit there and go, I'll bring you the House of Commons chamber, you might notice there's a bit of difference between the UK House of Commons and New Zealand Parliament on the way how the Parliament looks. So if we go to the House of Commons in the UK, and I'll just get the picture. So in the UK, the House of Commons, this is the layout of the House of Commons. In New Zealand, as you can sit there and see there, you'll notice the Parliament is very different in the way it's laid out. In New Zealand, we only have 120 MPs. In the UK, they have 650. All the accent sellers say, well, we did learn our accents from English. Well, I do like that. Okay, well, all your accents sound the same. Yeah, but we're proudly New Zealanders here. Yeah. Okay, let's get on to Hannah Rafferty-Maipi-Clark on probably why this bill is not good.
This is a split call. Hannah Rafferty-Maipi-Clark.
Tēnā rā koe te pika o te rā, tēnā rā tātou. I te whare e tu ana hau ki te waha i ngā kōrero mo te Pāti Māori i tēnei o ngā rangi, that we completely oppose this bill. This bill establishes a serious offender declaration and a new military-style academy order in the Oranga Tamariki Act 1989. The young person is aged 14 to 17 years old at the time of offending. The young person has 2 or more eligible offences punishable by at least 10 years or imprisonment. This bill takes rangatahi who have already been failed by our systems, brands them as young serious offenders, and sends them further into the very institutions that have repeatedly caused harm. A label is not a solution. A boot camp is not rehabilitation. Māori children now make up over 53% of all tamariki in severe struggle across Aotearoa. 1 in 4 tamariki Māori are growing up in whānau that can't afford basics. That's 77,000 children. Aotearoa has tried this before as activity camps, boot camps and institutions. Even the government's own evaluation cannot justify turning this pilot into law. Only 11 rangatahi participated. or were Māori. The evaluators themselves said larger numbers and long-term analysis were needed before strong conclusions could be drawn. The committee received 5,405 submissions in total. Nearly all submitters expressed a clear position on the bill. Of the total submissions, 24 supported the bill and 5,346 did not. 66% of those appearing in court, in the youth court, are Māori. That's 14% of the population. No conclusive evidence that military-styled academies are successful. New research published in the My Journal 2026 speaks directly to this bill. The study draws on a wānanga with 11 kaupapa Māori social workers, youth workers and organisational leaders working closely with rangatahi Māori involved in serious offending. When the state mistakes trauma for defence and response with control instead of care, restraint instead of relationship and punishment instead of healing. A military-style academy is built around that very misunderstanding. It sees the behaviour but refuses to understand the context that created it. I'm often whakamā to talk about kaupapa and policies that relate to Oranga Tamariki matters because my upbringing has been the complete antithesis of this. I have had clear, Te Reo Māori was my first language, access to my culture, growing up on my papakainga whenua, not even being able to just visit my pepeha but live on my pepeha. And I've often seen that as a privilege, but it isn't a privilege. This is basic rights that all Tamariki Māori should have access to across the country. And these are the legislations that are in front of Tamariki who have kai, whenua, health, education and housing needs. So I ask this side of the government who is consistently interjecting into my kōrero, what is this government doing to address those needs? Instead of creating different ways of punishing rangatahi who are in state care, who are reoffending, what are the contexts behind it? You have to ask yourself, why are rangatahi going up on the roofs? Why are rangatahi actually in state care in the first place? Let's answer that, because these are the policies and legislation. This is the finding. There is no evidence as to how a military-style boot camp will be successful in removing tamariki Māori outside of state care. And I want to acknowledge the kōrero that my colleague Tamariki Paul for the Green Party, when we actually go, two of the most experiences that I've had here in Parliament is listening to the removal of Section 7AA and being a rangatahi Māori in one of the highest positions and governance roles in the country and not being able to assist tamariki who are on the roofs of Korowai Manaaki, and that's what we have talked about tonight, because we should be able to get tamariki out of state care and the legislations that affect it, not to punish it even more.
I agree with Hannah Rafiti's speech.
Oh, exactly. And like, you've got to find out the root cause of what the problem is. You know, if someone is exercising their due process right, that should not be seen as grounds of you're being disrespectful. I've got to give you a retaliatory, disproportionate punishment. And that's the thing that's going to be seen there, is you've got to understand. So if someone's suddenly become a stick in the mud or something in there, you've got to find out why. You know, you don't just sit there and go, you know what, I'm being unfair to that person, but you know what, I've got to punish them to teach them in there, because sometimes life ain't fair. Well, there are certain things, there are rights there, and when you sit down there and cross that line, you destroy the trust in the system. You know, you're going to, you know, and the thing is, you know, what do you do when the shit goes wrong? Many people, when the shit go wrong, when they sit down there and have abused someone on it or sit there and do it, they don't go sit there and go, hey, look, I got it wrong. They sit there and double down. They triple down. They quadruple down. So by the time they get held accountable, where it was a little issue here, it has sit there and shot right up to that lampshade up there. That will be sitting there, you know, the length of what people will sit there and do when they sit down and get it wrong. And, you know, yeah, it's a shame that, you know, hearing that pilot there of a military boot-style camp was 100% Māori for a population that only equates to 20% of the population of New Zealand. That is quite concerning that on a pilot had 100% Māori children there. That is quite concerning. You know, and I mean, you know, like talking about, you know, putting them in Palmer store for the kids from Auckland, you know, what happens if you get someone who's a bit, like, you know, aware of where they are around the country?
Can I also add to one of the most, when it came to over-the-top punishment, I think Asia was one of the last places on earth to get rid of it, but I'm not sure if your listeners will be surprised. In the society I grew up in Hong Kong from, I think 1988 to 1994, if you were naughty, the parents were allowed to get a cane out or a bamboo stick.
Yeah, we used to have here in New Zealand. Thank goodness it sat there and gone. You know, that was an expected style of punishment when my grandparents were teaching at schools, and it was something they did not actively look at. But that was the way how people were taught. Oh, Kane would sit there and teach them a good lesson. You know, doesn't sit down there and address the fact of, you know, what could be going wrong. You know, and like, you know, some people go, well, it didn't sit there and make me any different. Like, you know, abusing someone isn't a rite of passage.
No,
and I think that should be seen there as, you know, being, you know, just because someone has physically done that in the past, does that mean that was right, or does that mean it was wrong? You know, sitting there keep repeating the wrongs, expecting to get it right, doesn't sit down there and change it. Just like the saying goes, 2 wrongs don't make it right. It just means you've done something wrong twice.
Can I also add the bamboo stick campaign were known to cause trauma, and it wasn't until 1990 or 1994 in Hong Kong when it was outlawed. That was how crazy it was.
Well, I'm glad that it's outlawed, but I mean, it's a shame it took them so long. But I mean, we didn't get rid of corporal punishment at schools until the 80s. So I wouldn't sit there and say New Zealand was exactly world leading when it came to that. You know, it wasn't until the 80s that they got rid of corporal punishment. Yeah. Okay, let's get on to Katharine Carter.
Madam Speaker, I rise to speak on the Tamariki Responding to Serious Youth Offending Amendment Bill and to confirm that the Green Party opposes this legislation alongside survivors of abuse and care, kids currently in state care, kids who have been through the system, experts and those at the flax roots, along with a plethora of select committee submitters. The ideology behind this bill is based on punishment rather than what works. It's a bill based on flawed thinking, that if we become tougher on young people, we will reduce offending. There is no evidence to show that this will happen. I challenge the government MPs to think about radical love, and when you show someone love and you wrap support around them and their families, they can do great things. And when we ensure that people have access to a community, rehabilitation, and all of the things they need, we make our society safer. This bill is a national shame, and I am embarrassed for members who cheer on such cruelty towards our young people, who often have never seen anything except cruelty. Government parties and the minister in charge have been kicking these young people around like a political football for years, and it has to stop. All through the 2023 campaign, national campaign on being tough on crime. Things like your boot camps didn't work, but ours will. Instead of looking at evidence, instead of resourcing the communities that prevent this harm from happening, instead of ensuring that children in Aotearoa don't grow up in poverty, these are things that this government could be focusing on, but instead they're sticking to that ideology of tough on crime and cruelty. And I'm ashamed. This tough on crime rhetoric came amid rising poverty, hefty cuts to community programs and programs that were working with youth and other policies affecting vulnerable families. We've got a government who is pushing through with things like cancelling emergency housing. And when they had cancelled emergency food parcels, bringing in benefit sanctions and making it harder for young people to access a benefit if they're disabled or in cancer treatment. The minister has continued to use these kids as a political football. And until the bootcamp pilot was a complete failure, and then the minister started refusing to have any transparency around the trials when it didn't work for them and their narrative. At the Green Party, we believe in ensuring that every child in Aotearoa grows up with safety, stability and aroha, and it is clear from the actions of this government, from the policies that they choose to prioritise, that this is not a vision that we share. I believe that the young people in this country can be the best that they can possibly be when we give them all of the things they need. Oh, gosh, there's so much to say on this bill and only a few more minutes to say it. So I guess we need to look into, let's just look into one area. It is labelling these kids as serious young offenders. Young people are not simply statistics, labels, or problems to be managed. They are young people who have experienced profound trauma, instability, neglect, abuse, poverty, and disconnection from their communities. Many are neurodivergent. Many have experienced significant failures in the systems that were meant to support them. At the Green Party, we have a plan to ensure that Children in this country have everything that they need and their families are supported, and that is a future we believe in, and that is a future that we will continue to fight for.
Nancy Lowe.
Madam Speaker, let's come back to evidence. The evidence is that there are...
I agree with Kahurangi Carter.
Oh, exactly.
What she's trying to say is we need to sort the source of trauma out. That's what she's basically saying. Sending those children to a boot camp doesn't work, period.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I know it's going to be a crappy seat warmer speech, but I would love to see Nancy Lowe tell us about this evidence. So let's kick it off, Nancy, and educate us.
A small group of youth offenders who repeatedly commit to very serious offences around the country, who under the current justice system, that they are not being properly rehabilitated, that they're not paying the price for the consequences, and that is putting the victims at the top harm. And I cannot believe that the opposition parties would go about Aroha and everything else without putting victims first. This is the National Party who's serious about restoring law and order and building the future for all New Zealanders.
Helen White. Thank you. In response to the...
Seat warmer.
I can't bother putting on the graphic. She doesn't deserve it. But hey, guess what, Nancy? I thought I was going to learn about evidence here. What did I get? A National Party campaign policy statement. And I learned nothing from your speech there, Nancy. So, for those in Auckland, I'm not sure where Nancy Lowe's going to be sitting. But hey, you know, that's what it is. If you'd like to sit down there and address your concerns with Nancy Lowe, feel free to go to Christopher Luxon's electorate office, because Christopher Luxon shares an electorate office with Nancy Lowe.
Can I say something about Nancy Lowe? She's from China, right?
Yes, but not the one that's apparently, according to Winston, shares the same ideology as Lawrence does.
I'm not trying to make fun of Lawrence or Nancy, but Nancy, I've got to be really critical of her. Hey, Nancy, maybe you could come clean on why some behaviors in Hong Kong and China survived joint declaration, survived the 1980s negotiations, survived one country, two systems. Why? Because I know in Hong Kong, that is the truth. And it's a pretty ugly sight, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's
sorry to having to be so critical about that, because the form of punishment, even though they hide it from the news, I know it still exists because I hear about it.
Yeah, think about the victims who were punished illegally. Think about the victims. Oh God, I'm probably speaking blasphemy according to Nancy Lowe. Yeah. Now, which QR codes have I got on there that are relevant? Because I haven't loaded any in this week because I haven't had time. It's been another stressful week. There's the Community Magistrates Amendment Bill closes on Friday the 14th of August. The Environment Reporting Bill closes on Thursday 20th of August. And the Regulatory System Social Security Amendment Bill closes, number 2 closes on there. There's a bunch of bills in there, but I'll tell you right now, no bills in this current Parliament went through first reading in the last 3 sitting days. So, yeah, but oh my God. I feel horrified. Nancy Lowe has just sat down there and just shown a big round of a disappointment. And yes, I know tonight I'm being a lot more tougher on our government MPs at the moment than I probably have been. But yeah, you know, it's one of those things there. So yeah, any other things you'd like to say before we go, Alex?
I say to Lawrence, you've done pretty well against Winston Peters, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's quite intriguing, and I don't think Winston realised that Lawrence came to New Zealand when he was aged 9. Was it 9 or 12? One of the two.
And Nancy Lowe, you got no ground to stand on, sadly.
Well, I will be honest with you. Nancy Lowe has been in New Zealand as long as Lawrence has also been in New Zealand. Age-wise.
Understood.
Yeah, so yeah, just to let you know, Nancy Lou is like Lawrence has been in New Zealand for quite some time. So yeah. The MP who has had the shortest period of time from when moving to New Zealand to becoming a MP for Parliament was Rima Nakle, who is the MP for Takanini. And beware, for those out there, she's an Australian.
Can I say something fun? Can I give a hard time on Rima Nakle if possible?
Go ahead.
Hey Rima, you should be lucky Australia has 2 Hong Kong buses or 3 here for preservation.
Oh, I think that's a bit going on the tangent there, Alex. she probably doesn't sit there as passionate about buses as you are. Yeah. Okay. We will be back here next Sunday. We might have a Members' Day marathon. Depends how the bills go in Parliament. I have to make the assessment today. This week coming up is a very busy week on my cards. But yes, we'll be back next Sunday, either at 6 p.m. or 8 p.m. for more from the Order Paper podcast. Have a good evening.
Thank you for watching the Order Paper, your express ticket to the New Zealand House of Representatives. Every episode, we unravel the complex world of legislation, debate, and democracy. From bills to select committees, we've got it all covered. From our team of political commentators who will dissect and explain what's happened so you can remain up to date on what's happened in the Aotearoa, New Zealand Parliament. To support our channel, you can become a Patreon member at patreon.com/it'sintheballot. The Order Paper podcast is brought to you by It's in the